All right, this is the first podcast, and I'm super excited to speak to this gentleman tonight, Ben Mackay. He's the founder of Penny Skateboards, and not only a huge inspiration, but a big mentor for myself. And I won't talk too much about him because he's going to tell his story, and I'm excited to hear it. So, welcome, Ben.
Thanks, buddy.
How are you,
Thanks for
mate?
having me along. Good.
So, Penny Skateboards. I mean, I've followed its whole journey. 64 countries. I think over 2,500 retailers. You started it from, I think it was your sister's name, but mate, tell me the journey. How did this thing come about? And I'm that excited for tonight. So yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, I guess the Penny story before we started Penny in 2010. There's a bit of a backstory to the skateboard business. So about 1999, I quit my job and started concreting and laying house slabs, and had realised pretty early on that I just didn't want to be doing that my whole life. So had some ambitions to own and operate a skateboard business in Australia here down in Daisy Hill, and started manufacturing. I built all my own machinery, my hydraulic presses and glue rolling machines and things like that, and really started manufacturing skateboards. Imported all the glue from Chicago and all the timber from the Greater Lakes district up in the USA, and just started smacking it out and just started pressing boards, and had no business plan. Just had an ambition and a desire and a passion to make skateboards, and really didn't go into too much detail about how I was going to execute it, but just started out small, and had a lot of problems initially with even just trying to get all the pressure and the glue and everything correct to keep them from delaminating and keeping the ply together. So, it was a long journey in that first inception of building and making timber skateboard decks. And once I got that right, I really started to drive up and down the coast of Australia, just building a network or a database of retail surf and skate shops, and would supply my first brand, which was Seven Skates, to surf and skate shops up and down the southeast coast of Australia. And so from there, just kept plugging at it, and connected with Andy McKenzie, who was a bit of a hero of mine in the skate industry. He was very well known in Queensland and Australia for bringing skateboarding from the States to Australia, and it was a distributor for a lot of really good key brands at the time. And approached Andy and wanted to see if there was some sort of synergy that I could produce some skateboards for him, for his Koala brand, or and he was quite actually really instrumental in helping me and my business get off the ground in the early stages of probably 2001. And he put some big orders in, and I was hand screen printing all the boards and putting the Koala logo on the boards, and he would sell those to blanks. That's a good question. I have no idea. It was probably 21, maybe.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Bit of 22. And so really, Andy, I guess, was the first sort of big break, and a 500 board order was pretty instrumental to a small little backyard business, and it was like 12 grand, and it was a huge order, and it took me a very long time to put those boards together and glue them all up and lacquer them and screen print them, and at the time delivered the boards, and he was stoked, and we just worked that business relationship for a little while, and then the movie Dogtown and Z-Boys came out, and that was a real pivotal point for me. I'd sort of locally probably was distributing or selling my skateboards to sort of maybe down to Ballina and then up the sunny coast and a bit further up north, but really had quite a small footprint of the shops that I was servicing at the time for Seven Skates. And then the movie Dogtown and Z-Boys came out, and I could really see that skateboarding had really gone through, that pushed skateboarding so far to the limits that your ordinary average skateboarder couldn't do the tricks that we were seeing on the videos, and hurtling themselves down a 13-stair handrail, and it was just unattainable for most people. And so I could see that skateboarding, two things were sort of happening in skateboarding at that time, and one was that old was becoming new again, and that what kids could do on PlayStation was very different to their, skill level
in real life.
In real life, yeah, exactly. So I just reached out to the guys at Z-Flex in Venice Beach, which is a heritage brand from 1976, and I actually asked them if I could be their Australian distributor for Z-Flex, and so I started doing that, and got in a few boards, and it started, selling them into the small account base that I had, and really just started building that business, and then all of a sudden I could see.
How many accounts did you have at the time?
I reckon probably had 10 or 15. It's geographically surf and skate shops or surf shops that carried skate were very, geographically spread out across Australia. So you're doing a lot of driving.
A lot of kilometres.
And not much return. So, I really realised pretty quickly that with the Z-Flex product, it was something that was quite an easy sell in into, and I could grow my database or my retail partners significantly, and not have to drive and visit them door to door, but started to do it by way of phone calls only and opening new accounts, all
which obviously saves a lot of money and fuel
for sure, and just the accessibility of getting there, and just thinking in a way that I knew wouldn't be too big of an outlay for a retailer, but also giving them the opportunity to support something new, and also priced at the right price that would sort of fit in that price point for Z-Flex. So that was really, I guess, an eye opener for me to realise that I could service more doors quite quickly, and meant that I could stop concreting during the day and pressing boards at night. So it was a
full-time role.
It did eventually. I was on my honeymoon and had a break, and said to my wife, "Oh, you know what? When I get back, I'm going to quit concrete and I'm just going to do this full time."
Yeah, and, that's cool. And how old were you then?
Oh, dude, probably 26, 27.
Yeah, nice.
So it was a long road, and it was definitely not an overnight success. And at that point, so I guess built that business to probably up to about 300 doors across Australia. And at the time, skateboarding was also going through something quite significant. The manufacturing side of things, when I talked before about hand screen printing onto the skateboards. So it was quite a challenge. It was messy, and a lot of rejects because of leaked ink, or it was quite.
And you guys were actually hand screening it yourself.
I was setting up, and we didn't have tool. We had to make all our jigs and templates and go to Gabba Screens at Wollongabba and get the screens made, and then bring them home, and then retrofit a hinge system on them, and just placement on the boards to register them, to make sure that the registration was correct. And
wow.
It was, and I'd never obviously done anything like that in my life, but I just wanted to give it a crack. Yeah. So did that, and then as I was saying, so screen printing was starting to fall away because some genius in China created a heat transfer, so it was printed onto a full colour print. Onto a clear film. Yeah. And so then it was sprayed with this coating, and then it was dried out. Yeah. And you could just roll up this transfer and ship it all around the world. And so all of a sudden, no longer were you doing full colour screens and doing tip to tail graphics over a complex shape. Yeah. You could have a heat transfer machine that was basically a hot silicon roller or two rollers, and you'd lay the graphic on the board dry, and then you put it through the feeder, and voila, there's this perfect graphic every time applied onto a skateboard. So I'd seen a really small picture actually in a skate magazine, in Slam magazine, of Hardcore, which was Globe. Yeah. They had this really small quarter of a photograph of what a heat transfer machine looked like. And I thought, I reckon I could make one of those, and it definitely revolutionised my little business. So I gave it a crack, and I, from my glue rolling machine, I had some contacts in Acacia Ridge, just locally, that could produce silicon rollers, and I knew that I could buy heat lamps and things to heat up the rollers. Yeah. And welded a few things up, and had this dodgy heat transfer machine, and then I jumped on Google and found a couple of suppliers in China that could produce such a transfer, and and then had all of a sudden had access to a whole new market where something that really changed my business model was the shopboard program. So essentially I would have blank skateboards that I would produce, manufacture, and then put the shop's name on it, like Skate Biz or Extreme Skates. And so it was a great business because my minimums were very low for the heat transfer machine, for the heat transfers, and gave me a reason to call them back in a couple of weeks. So I'd have regular contact with the shop and also try and get Z-Flex and Seven and exactly other brands that we had in there. And so the shopboard program was a really good inlet for my little business to value add to shops and also keep the minimums down and have a real genuine reason to call the shop to make a sale.
And help grow it, and then give them that kind of feeling that they've got their own skateboard for.
Correct, and it met a price point instead of a regular blank. It was promoting the shop out in the skate parks in the city, and was a good way for people to for shops to get their name out there.
Yeah, cool. And then from there, how did I suppose it's a crazy journey you've come from, and I mean, you've grown up in Logan, actually, where I grew up as well. So, I actually remember seeing your Seven Skates van around when I was at school myself, walking home from school or riding my BMX bike. So I remember seeing the whole journey of it growing, and then seeing that penny board come out and boom. How did kind of you transfer from going from this plastic skateboard to, how did this all come about?
So I think, penny was the thing that put us on the map, but before that, as I said, sort of really piggybacked on that that whole old is new again, and retro is back, and
the history
and the full circle of skateboarding, and I'd seen that with Z-Flex, and I was sitting there one night and I was talking to my wife. I'm like, I really think that there's something in that little plastic board. I had one when I was a kid, and I thought, you know what, I reckon that thing needs to come back. And so we started to, I think it was 2008 or 2009, started to prototype and do a lot of work at going and visiting local factories to see, how we'd get the board produced, and plastic injection molding was something that I, thought would be a good way to produce these things. And pardon me, so we went to, had all this, all the sourcing obviously from China, my suppliers in China, because at that time I'd taken control of the supply from America. We took the Z-Flex products and got them manufactured in China. Because Z-Flex as a brand just couldn't keep up with the demand for the Australian market.
So you'd grown it that big in Australia.
Yeah,
cool.
And so it gave us the flexibility to control the, obviously the stock and the supply, and then we'd created the demand through putting it in the window of the shops. And so for Penny, then we prototyped it, and like you said in the opening comment, I named it after my sister Penny. And,
how did that come about? What?
I just had that whole, I think, when I threw around a few names, and I think that, the Penny name was something, it's like the Beatles, Penny Lane, or I think it just had that really good, reminiscence, or that old school sort of vibe that I was looking for. I think was really fitting for the product. And so
totally agree.
And so, in 2010, we put it to market, and I had a whole lot of, obviously I had, the 300 odd doors that we were servicing, and everybody, all my retail the partners that were stocking our products were all very excited to range the product. And then, it was the most picked up skateboard in the shop, but the least sold. And we'd sold it in really well, but then all of a sudden I think people didn't really understand that it was a functioning skateboard, while they would pick it up and say, I remember a board like that, that's cool. Because it was so small at 22.5 inches, and your regular skateboard is 30 inches. Exactly.
Or ride the board.
Exactly. And so, it was that real hurdle, and I'm thinking, oh man, how are we going to solve this? Because I know it rides well. We designed it and built it to ride and function really well, and it was completely unlike the skateboards of the 70s, the plastic boards which were basically pigs. These things were fast and smooth, and they turned really well. So we put out a little video on YouTube, and that once skateboarders really picked that up and realized, this board actually it works, it functions. And it was also quite a challenge, because at the same time skateboarders love a challenge, and then all of a sudden kids were doing tray flips and all the pop shovels, like just
And they're just creating all this content.
Exactly. Yeah, and putting it on YouTube.
Yeah, and this is obviously before, Facebook, Instagram. So literally you only had YouTube that was, really, I think it was MySpace days, but the only way to really promote it, to promote a brand. So
MySpace, I've still got MySpace, that's cool.
Yeah, I think I do. I've probably got some friend requests there.
So 2010 and then 2011 was still Australia. And then all of a sudden we started to get, I think a Bolorama was on down at Bondi.
Yep.
And I know a couple of pros took the boards back for their kids and then, started to get some traction and get some attention in the US and other global markets. And the business just absolutely erupted in terms of volume because it was such a product. We couldn't keep it in stock, and so we had to get the boards.
Yeah, wow.
The decks actually also made and assembled in China, because we had, I had mates and kids and staff, and we were building the boards. So we'd get the decks made locally, and then we'd be assembling the trucks and wheels onto the boards here in Logan home.
Yeah, wow.
And I remember it just about coming out the door. We had, pallets and pallets and pallets of components, and then we'd have to get these things onto the boards and bolt them on and ship them out, and
just controlling that too.
It was crazy. Yeah, it was just nuts. And anyway, we seemed to pull it off in Australia, and by that time, I suppose we'd had from a business perspective, we'd had a lot of systems in place because of the volume of business that we were doing in Australia here. So we had, a significant amount of staff, and we had not only a lot of opportunity, but also the ability to build a business behind the brand. So Absolute Board Co. is the skate business. It's like the global distribution business, and Penny's the brand, and Seven and Z-Flex are the brands. So, we had all this excitement and opportunity in other regions, and people were talking about using distributors in other regions in America, and I just thought, you know what, it's great to have a brand, but I really can't control that brand or know if it's being put in the right channel. So
brand protection's everything, when it's yours.
It's critical, it is key. And so I thought, it's one of those things where we had a distribution model here. And so I said to Luke Campbell, my business partner, he sold out of he's a chartered accountant, he sold out of his practice, and I said, mate, you got to join this thing. It's
and helped you along the journey with you.
And so he helped really embed a lot of business discipline and process into the business too in those early stages. So I said, mate, we got to build this business in the States. Let's just up and leave for 3 months and let's go and replicate this same business model and systems in the US. And so that's what we did. I had a 2-year-old son, and my wife was pregnant with our second, and we just up and left, and the business was running pretty well autonomously without us here in Australia. And at the time, the dollar was like, we were producing all our sales are in Australian dollars, and the dollar was over parity. It was like $1.10 Australian. It was incredible. So we're making all this AUD, and then we're building a business that was costing money, but it was cheap because Australia was $1.10 to the US. So it was a really good time, and in terms of currency timing and so then we went and built, basically replicated all the same systems and procedures in the US. We hired about 7 sales staff and some warehouse guys and some logistics guys, and we rented a warehouse.
Did you know anyone in America when you went over? Did you have any idea?
That's a good question. So Butch Sturbans, he's an old Z-boy from Z-Flex, and when I started doing Z-Flex in Australia, we connected, and then so he was my point of contact, and he was actually repping Z-Flex in the US, in Oceanside, for Z-Flex. And so then when we started, in 2007, before Penny erupted, I actually had the opportunity to buy Z-Flex International, so I bought the whole company, and so I had the rights for the US and the rest of the world. And so we kept Butch on as a sales guy when we came over there in 2012, I think it was. And we set up in Oceanside in Southern California, and Butch was he's our first US sales guy. He's still there today.
That's awesome. So he's still there to this day.
And just
what a legend.
loves Z-Flex with a passion.
That's awesome.
It was so just trained everyone up, and obviously the US, we were very green and naive and just thought, we're on a roll, let's just have a crack, and we knew at that time that we had really strong competitors coming out with a plastic board too, like Globe and Stereo, And I always say that, you know, competitors just make you so much better. And I think there's 100%. This healthy paranoia that you have as a brand owner or as a business person or entrepreneur that, you know, you're in the race and you got to sometimes get your bulldog out and just, you know, go like crazy. Yeah. And so those times were incredibly stressful, you know, personally, but at the same time, you know, there's some of the defining moments of your business where you just seem to just knuckle down and just do whatever it takes. And there's a sacrifice, 100%. You know, personally as well. But you know, you just got to get in and do it, and it's for a season. I think, you know, long term, you just got to realise that is a season, and you have to be sensible enough as a father and a husband and a business owner to know that can't continue balance for a long period of time. But so we did that in the States in 3 months, and you know, we said we wanted to be in, I don't know, over 1,000 doors before we left, and have a good manager in place, and obviously, you know, one of our key goals was to be in Zoomies, you know, the biggest retailer. One of
those guys. We had about 600 stores, I think. Over there.
I think 630. It was a massive number, and so you know, by the end we left, we were in a lot of really good accounts, and we also got into Zoomies, and it was just a really amazing and successful time for our little business to actually sort of replicate our model and system. And then, you know, I remember when we were training the sales guys, and we were thinking, because Sector 9 was just the lead product in skate hard goods. It was just, it'd been there for decades, or, you know, a good amount of time. It solidified itself in the marketplace.
So you had to train your sales team about the penny product and what it stood for as a brand, and why you were making this brand.
And to an audience that were new to hearing a plastic skateboard, surely that would retail for $30 USD. And we're saying, no, it's 100, 109. And
why?
It's a full Keystone margin of $50 wholesale. And so, you know, we had to, for me, I guess it was a real opportunity to hone our sales skills and really navigate through some of the main hurdles. You know, we had to break down, well, why is Sector 9 so good, and start talking about margins, and, you know, really getting in there with and understanding the competitors and the competitor set to see where were these little cracks in the system that we could see that would make our product be placed in the right doors and be ranged well, and even get the buyer from a cold call. How do you convert those guys to a sale? And so it was an amazing time where we would just go on hell for leather, and it helps when you have an exceptional product at the right place at the right time. So it was one of those things in skateboarding where, and I'm not saying this flippantly, but, you know, skateboarding goes through cycles, and it was just the right product at the right time. It lowered the barriers to entry for everyone to have fun again. Our whole, you know, theme was about fun and just bringing the fun back. Boy, girl, young, old. Just have fun on a skateboard
and have fun.
Exactly.
It wasn't about doing a kickflip or you know, being good at anything, just having fun.
100%. And I remember, you know, Jay Adams, one of the original, he's dubbed the seed of skateboarding. He passed away, and we were at his paddle out funeral at the at Venice Beach there, and it was a paddle out memorial, and I saw Stacey Peralta just sitting on the beach, and I was like, oh man, I should go and talk to Stacey. You know, and so I went up to, he was just sitting on a surfboard waiting to paddle out, and I'm like, hey Stacey, and it's Ben, I'm Absolute Bullco and Penny Skateboards, and he's like, oh man, I've been meaning to talk to you. He said it's just amazing what's happened. He said, you know what, just enjoy the journey. He said he said skateboarding needed that for a decade or so. It's the very thing that skateboarding needed to just rejuvenate the sport and just rejuvenate, you know, the whole industry in terms of retailers, helping them keep their lights on. And And so for me, that was like another defining moment where I was like, wow, I just have so much respect for Stacey, and then for him to say that and just say, you know, just remember to have fun along the way, because I'm sure he would know that, you know, with the big business like that, there comes a whole lot of, you know, corporate governance and just a lot
of little headaches every day,
and senior management, and then having to, you know, pass that point where, you know, I guess even at some point the business got so large that, you know, we had executive management, C-level, you chief level executives in the business and
yeah.
finance, and it was just a time where I was stretched personally. It was great to experience, and we're at board level, we're non-executive directors, not in the business, not operating in the business in the day-to-day, and elevated to a board level, and that whole experience was just was amazing for me personally, and was just such a great experience.
So much.
Yeah, it was just an awesome opportunity for from a professional level to really be, even have to be able to sit in that environment. Let alone having me as the owner owning the business at the same time. So it was incredibly great, but it was also incredibly stressful.
Oh, the stress that you would have gone through too.
Yeah.
Did you get to keep skateboarding the whole time?
Yeah, always surfing and skateboarding. Yeah. And but it was one of those things where everything comes at a cost, and if I was to be brutally honest, of course I would do it all over again, and I would do it a million different ways. But I think sometimes too, it's often in the hardest times that it is where I think you grow the most. Yeah. And so the business continued to grow, and we went and replicated the same business in Southampton in the UK. So we had a head office here in Australia with a CEO and a CFO and a brand manager, and a pretty big executive team and a board, and head office was in Australia, and we had the American business in Oceanside that would do all of US and the Americas, and then we did the same thing in Southampton that would feed all of UK and Europe. So we had a pretty significant global distribution footprint. And
how many countries did you actually get into?
I think we're in something like 64 countries.
And retail doors that you guys stocked with Penny?
Yeah, I don't even know. That was, at some point, it was just phenomenal. Maybe.
I think I read something about 3,500, but it's,
it would have been something like that, yeah. And obviously, controlling branding and also controlling the channel was exceptionally hard when you're using distributors and when there's such a high demand for the product. Our product ended up in Costco 2 or 3 times, maybe even more, maybe 4 times.
How did you deal with that?
It was just incredibly stressful because you're trying to support American surf skate, and because that was the market that it was affecting.
Yes, yep.
And then, it was... you've got distributors, and we had so many distributors in other countries that we couldn't like Russia was ordering $1 million a month at some point, and at some point that product has to end up in a grey market or in the wrong channel. So the challenge
it's
too
stress to manage to make sure your product's in the right channels.
For longevity, and we knew that it was a cycle. Like we couldn't continue to sustain that sort of growth. So you wanted to be respectful and make sure that your channel strategy was right, and that you weren't just you didn't go too broad in your distribution. And we made some whopping mistakes in that. Taking the sale versus versus not taking the sale and keeping it in channel. And but the Costco thing was a complete disaster for us because obviously our competitors was a great sales talking piece for that, but.
And did you? It's something you went back on and said about you learn a lot more when things aren't going right. Do you think you learnt more from when you make the mistakes? It's that whole thing when you make mistakes. It's the 100%. Only way you really learn too. Yeah, you have to get out there and make them.
Yeah, I mean, there's book smart and there's street smart, I guess. And I didn't have the book smart, so I guess I got educated in the street smart side of things. So it was one of those things where you continually have to reassess and make sure that you're on the right track, so it was a great time, but the Costco thing was just something that was unfortunate, and even having distributors in India that were pumping the product through and getting it into Costco, so it was we definitely made some mistakes in that aspects for distribution.
And you can see when you do, it's something you definitely learn from, and I can see from looking at from the industry we're in, if you go into retail stores like that and you're stocking really good surf skate street stores, that it can really detriment that, and that's the last thing you want to do when you've been helping them grow their business. And it goes in there. So I know the feeling. It wouldn't be nice at all.
It's rough
to see that happen.
It's rough.
The distribution channels were so big, and you guys 64 countries, 3,500 retailers. do you know the revenue you guys must have been doing? Do you know from starting something from
Dude, I'm not
out of
answering
Logan?
that question.
What's that? I'm not answering it. I want to know it. I'm excited to know it, but I'm trying to make a hard guess on the revenue.
No, so when we were in Australia, 2009, I think we went from 300 in revenue to $1 million to $3 million in 2010. That was just all in the AU business.
Yeah.
And I know we let me think. So I think so. We did a couple of 3 mil, and then that year when we started, we went to the States. I'm getting all my years mixed up. I'm hopeless with dates. But,
okay.
So I know we went from 3 mil to 19 mil. We did it all on cash. We didn't have any financiers,
Which
no
is
lenders,
huge.
no facilities, and and so then we went from 3, 19. I have to talk to Luke, ask Luke if this is correct, but like 19 to 32 to 54 million in our peak.
Wow.
And so now we put half that business now.
Yeah. And how many staff did you have at that point?
Oh, we had over 100. So those figures aren't all skate. So during that process,
you had the other brands running as well, right?
Yeah, the other brands, but then also we had an opportunity. So Uppercut Deluxe is a barber business, hair pomade, and the boys Steve and Luke and Kira were are the founders of that business. They started it out of a garage. They're barbers themselves, Steve and Luke, best mates. And
I even use Uppercut. Don't have it tonight, but I love the brand. Love it.
So that was I knew them through skateboarding, and then their business had blown up, and really it was getting international demand. Very similar, sort of a totally different product, similar story, getting
similar
international
retail
demand
stores as well.
Yeah, so all in the barber channel.
Yeah.
And then they were getting some opportunity overseas in Europe and in America, and then they came to us and said, look, this thing's going to need cash. We want to give this business and this brand the best opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
Is there some synergies here? You guys have a great global distribution. And so we really saw that as a great opportunity to not only value add, but also start another business that was complementary, that could leverage that global distribution that we had.
Yep.
And so we got heavily involved in that business, and then we started to put it through our channel. And then initially we put it in the surf skate channel, and leveraged the sales staff that we already have.
Yep.
And it was a really great synergy, but also obviously integrating a small business into a larger business. There's a ton of challenges with rolling out a new strategy and having one executive team trying to execute a plan that we already had in place for the skate business,
but plus with a new thing coming in as well.
Exactly. So and it's a massive success story, that brand. And so now it is in we've separated the two businesses. So Absolute Board Co. is completely separate. Two executive teams, and Kira, the founder, is back in. She's the CEO of that business.
Yeah,
and we've struck a really good balance with.
It's an amazing story what you guys helped create with the Uppercut brand and what they've done. It's awesome.
And so now we've really spent a good year, cleaning channel and making sure that we are barber focused for Uppercut Deluxe, and we are barber centric, and everything we do is for that channel. So that's really been a great learning for us too, and making sure that we don't make the same mistakes from an executive point of view while we're growing that Uppercut business.
It's quite cool because I know that you grew up from you're from Logan, and it's cool to see success stories from this area. I grew up myself. What school did you go to? Where were you from? Did you grow up skateboarding? What age did you start skateboarding? Because this has not been something that's been a passion for you since you were a kid.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of it's a good question, because it's something that is your lifestyle, your passion.
Yeah, 100%.
It makes getting up every day a whole lot easier than doing something that you're not, or you can't fabricate, genuineness. So, I was skateboarding since I was 3 or 4, and I've got slides actually, photographs and slides of me on skateboard next to my mum's Kingswood in Roachdale, where we grew up, and then moved to Daisy Hill, and that's where I started the skate business out the back of my parents' place. But always skateboarding and surfing. I think I started surfing when I was 9. And I remember my dad, we bought an old pig of a surfboard, and my dad was actually a coach builder, so he was always into fixing things up. He was very handy. And, and so we stripped that surfboard back and we, repainted it, put some stickers on it. It was the best. And then we were pushing me into waves at Burleigh and just in the beach break there. And, some of my fondest memories, me and my dad was actually out in the water just surfing. And
yeah, that's cool.
And he's a legend. So, it was always a part of my lifestyle. And then I was a high school dropout. I got expelled from a school in Mansfield, private school, and then went to state school. And then as soon as I turned 15, did I even finish grade 9? I didn't even finish grade 10.
You didn't finish grade 10?
And then straight into an apprenticeship as a cabinet maker. And
so that was before concreting?
Yeah, so I did an apprenticeship and then became a tradesperson and did that for sort of another 4 years.
And did that help you with learning how to, to make skateboard decks?
I always had a passion for timber and woodworking and craft, and I think that really set the pace. And I remember my boss was just saying, mate, you're kidding yourself thinking you're going to do a skateboard business.
Give you more motivation, right?
100%. So it was just that fuel. And it's in those dark moments where I had like I said, I didn't have a business plan, but I had no idea that was going to pull anything off of significance. But you had a passion. And a determination, I think, too, where, as a business owner, you have to wear every hat, I'm in the warehouse, I'm packing, I'm sorting out logistics and procurement, I'm finding new products, I'm product testing.
Yeah,
I'm doing the books, my wife's doing the baths, you know what I mean? Like when we started out like that, it was just you're doing every single thing.
Yeah.
And then sales. And my dad also was a salesperson, so I learnt a lot when school holidays were on because I'd sit in the car and he would drive all the way out to Dalby and talk to farmers and big, butcheries and just... So I would be listening to how he would sell, and I wasn't consciously doing it, but it was just something a skill I think I picked up. And selling is a real technique, and I think that too is why we had so much success in the US, because not only do you wear so many hats, but there is a real skill to understanding a real sales strategy and navigating through difficult conversations with people and winning people over. Like it's just one of those things where, oftentimes you'd be in a difficult position and you'd want to, just attack them or just, verbally attack them or be the winner in the conversation.
That conversation comes out on top by the right words.
Exactly. And you can really turn that around. And if you humble yourself and have the ability to play long and think about what you're trying to grow.
Yeah, which is that's a great answer.
It's hard to do, but if you honestly have, I guess, a long play or a strategy that that you need to get to, sometimes you need to do that and just put them first. And, one thing my dad always said was the customer's right.
Correct.
And if he's not right, the customer's always right.
Yep.
So I think that was sort of some of those basic principles that have stayed with me through the journey.
Yeah, you don't realise growing up as a kid that those little things that help you with your career, and especially with young entrepreneurs today and what they're going through, that you don't need to know everything. You've just got to have that passion and willing to learn, but also at the same time, you don't realise you feed back those skills from growing up that can really help you. And when you start to realise that it's coming into play, you really start to leverage off that, I think. And you use just knowing the Penny skateboard story and seeing from a kid growing through, you can see how it really founded there. And it's an exciting story. It's really motivating to hear that.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
That's all right. And I mean, if you had any advice, which I know I'd be excited, any advice to give any young kid trying to give it a go, or anyone trying to start something, what would you give them?
I think for me, I guess if you came to me and said, I've got this great idea, and you talked to me about it and you said you were passionate about it, and I think if I could convince you that it was a bad idea, you don't want it enough.
Yeah.
No one could, a lot of people in my early days, people I knew, people I didn't know, people that I was talking to, industry people, many, many times people say, there's no money in skateboarding. And I'm thinking, I'm not, not doing this for a big paycheck. I know I'm doing this because I want to live in an industry that I want to be in. I want to be a part of this skateboarding, industry.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes if I'd listened to all that negativity or people that would tell me that I couldn't do it, you know, I know I wouldn't be where I am today. And or have had some of the wins that have happened along the way. It's just determination, and I think, you know, I said before, talking about being genuine, you can't fabricate that. You know, you can only go on for a certain amount of time when you can tell a story. But if it's in your lifeblood and it's a part of your DNA and who you are, then
100%.
It kind of makes it a whole lot easier. So if you can convince someone that their idea is terrible and they believe it, then they obviously don't want it enough.
Yeah, and they don't have the passion to actually do it. Yeah, it's a great answer. Great answer. You made me motivated hearing that, mate. Thanks.
Hey, you're a good fella.
Thanks, brother. Well, it was great to chat. I mean, thanks, Ben, for letting us use his awesome place. He's got his skate park out the back. It's, you know, I think it's about 8:30 at night. It's, but yeah, for our first podcast, thanks for letting us catch up with you, brother. It was awesome.
Cool, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.